The acceptance letter lay on the kitchen counter between us, crisp and official. Rhode Island School of Design, full scholarship, my dream made real on expensive paper. I watched my father's face turn from confusion to disgust as he read it. His hands moved before I could stop him, tearing the letter cleanly down the middle. The sound echoed in our silent kitchen like a gunshot. "You think we'll pay for this nonsense?" His voice cut through me, sharp and final. My mother stood at the sink, her back rigid, hands frozen in soapy water. She didn't turn around. She never did when things got ugly. Behind me, my brother Marcus leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, that familiar smirk playing at his lips. He'd just finished his first year of medical school, Dad's golden investment. The tuition check I'd asked them to co-sign slid across the granite countertop. Dad's pen moved with deliberate cruelty, writing void across it in red ink. The same red as the paint I loved, now weaponized. "Then pay for it yourself," he said, his tone arctic. I stood there, 19 years old, watching my family choose sides. They'd already decided. I was alone. "My name is Elena Ward." That was the night my parents decided I didn't deserve their love anymore, or maybe they'd never really loved me at all, just the version of me that fit their plans. I packed in the dark while rain hammered against my bedroom window. Clothes, art supplies, the few canvases I could fit in my old Honda. Each item I stuffed into boxes felt like cutting away pieces of myself. The house slept around me, indifferent to my leaving. 17 years I'd lived here, and now I was erasing myself from it in under 2 hours. Mom's voicemail came through as I loaded the last box. I played it on speaker, needing to hear if there was any regret in her voice. "Elena, this is foolish. You'll come back when you're hungry enough. We're not enabling your fantasies anymore. Not we're sorry. Not we love you. Just a promise that I'd fail and return, broken and grateful." I left my house key on the kitchen counter next to the torn letter. Dad could frame it if he wanted, proof that he'd won. The headlights cut through the rain as I drove away, and I didn't look back at the house. Looking back would have killed me. My first apartment sat above a laundromat in Providence, one room that smelled like detergent and mildew. The radiator clanked all night but barely heated. I painted between double shifts at Mario's Diner, my fingers raw from scrubbing dishes, my back aching from carrying trays. Art school without tuition money meant night classes at community college and whatever supplies I could afford. I painted on cardboard boxes, on thrift store canvases, on anything flat enough to hold pigment. The work poured out of me, dark and desperate. All the words I couldn't say to my family transformed into color and shadow. One painting sold on a local artist's website for $40. A stranger in Connecticut bought it, a small abstract piece I'd titled Exile. The message came through at 2 in the morning while I was heating canned soup on my hot plate. "There's something haunting in your work," the buyer wrote. "Keep painting." I cried into my soup that night, not from sadness but from the shock of being seen. Someone out there, a complete stranger, valued what I created. It wasn't much, $40 minus fees, but it was proof that my father was wrong. The gallery email came 6 months later. Harborview Arts, a small space near the waterfront, wanted to feature emerging artists. Would I be interested in showing 3 pieces? Almost said no. The voice in my head sounded like my father's, listing all the ways I wasn't ready, wasn't good enough, would embarrass myself. But I typed yes before fear could stop me. The opening night I wore a thrift store dress, navy blue with small buttons. Everyone else looked effortlessly expensive in their art world uniforms. I felt like an imposter, the poor girl playing dress-up. My 3 paintings hung on the white wall, small and vulnerable under gallery lights. A woman in her 60s studied my work for 10 minutes, silent and focused. Finally she turned to me. "You paint like you've lived through fire," she said, and bought all 3 pieces for $1,500 total. I stood in the gallery bathroom afterward, shaking. That money meant 2 months of rent, supplies, breathing room. It meant survival. That night driving home my phone rang. Mom's number. I answered, stupidly hopeful. Your brother just bought a medical center, she announced, her voice bright with pride. No hello, no how are you? Just Marcus's latest victory, held up like a mirror to my insignificance. The dinner invitation came 2 years later, a text from Mom like nothing had happened. Family dinner Sunday, 6 o'clock. Your father wants to see you. I should have known better, but hope is a stubborn, stupid thing. Maybe they'd changed. Maybe they'd seen my small gallery features, my slowly growing name. Maybe they wanted to apologize. Their house looked exactly the same, immaculate and cold. Marcus was there with his new wife Vanessa, both of them polished and perfect. We made awkward small talk over Mom's roast chicken. Nobody mentioned the 2 years of silence. Nobody acknowledged the check Dad had voided or the letter he'd destroyed. Dessert arrived, and Dad finally revealed the trap. Elena, we thought you could paint something for Marcus's clinic. Something uplifting, you know. Family supporting family. The words hung there, so casual, so entitled. They hadn't invited me home because they missed me or regretted how they'd treated me. They wanted free art, a convenient decorator to make Marcus look cultured. I charge for commissions now, I said quietly. Dad's face hardened. We're family. I stood up, napkin falling from my lap. Then you should have acted like it. I walked out before anyone could respond, leaving my half-eaten pie behind. The door closed softly behind me, and this time I felt nothing but relief. A local reporter named Alexis covered my next gallery show for the Providence Journal. She was young, hungry for stories that mattered. Over coffee, I told her everything, not planning to, but the words spilled out anyway. The torn letter, the voided check, the dinner trap. Her article ran with the headline, "The Daughter They Cut Off. Local Artist Rises Despite Family Rejection." It was honest and raw, my story laid bare for strangers to judge. I thought maybe 50 people would read it. The piece went viral within 2 days. Shared on social media, picked up by art blogs, discussed in comment sections. Suddenly I wasn't just Elena Ward, struggling artist. I was a symbol, proof that you could survive family abandonment and create something beautiful from the wreckage. My father called at midnight, voice shaking with rage. Take it down. You're humiliating us. I didn't write it, I said calmly. I just told the truth. You're making us look like monsters. Then maybe you shouldn't have acted like monsters, I replied and hung up. My hand didn't even tremble. Something inside me had shifted, hardened into something Dad couldn't break anymore. My next series painted itself in 3 furious months. Fractured homes, fading faces, empty chairs at dinner tables. I called it Inheritance, and every canvas was an exorcism. Critics called it a mirror of the modern family, unflinching and necessary. The show opened at a real gallery this time. Not a small co-op space but Meridian Gallery downtown, with wine and cheese and people who actually bought art. All 12 paintings sold before the opening ended. I stood in the corner, overwhelmed, watching strangers respond to my pain made visible. Marcus's wife Vanessa showed up uninvited, walking through the gallery with calculating eyes. She stopped at the largest canvas, a family portrait with faces turned away from a small figure in shadow. Looks a little familiar, doesn't it? She said loudly, her voice carrying. She took photos of every painting, especially the ones that resembled our family home. I watched her work, documenting evidence like a lawyer building a case. The threat was clear. They were watching, they were angry, and they wouldn't forget. But neither would I. The paintings were already sold, already out in the world. They couldn't take back what I'd already given away. The phone calls started coming in waves. Dad's number, Mom's, Marcus's, even relatives I barely knew. I let them all go to voicemail, listening later to the escalating fury. You're humiliating us with these paintings, Dad's message said. People know who you're talking about. I called him back once just to end it. I'm painting truth, I said when he answered. If the truth embarrasses you, maybe you should have lived differently. You're ungrateful and cruel, he spat back. I'm honest, I corrected. That's not the same thing. We gave you everything. You gave me conditions. There's a difference. The silence stretched between us, years of unspoken resentment finally given voice. I felt calm, centered, like I was standing on solid ground for the first time in my life. I'm done being your disappointment, I said. Find someone else to blame. I ended the call and blocked all their numbers. The relief was immediate, physical. My shoulders dropped, my jaw unclenched. I'd spent so long trying to earn their approval, and now I was finally, completely done trying. Marcus's medical center made headlines 6 months later, but not for the reasons he wanted. A former patient sued for malpractice. The local news covered it extensively, and somehow my paintings became part of the story. The family behind the fractured portrait, one article read, running photos of my gallery show next to pictures of the clinic. Reporters drew connections I hadn't made explicit, seeing in my work a commentary on the corruption of family dynasties built on image over substance. Marcus called from a blocked number, getting through my defenses. You did this on purpose, he accused. You knew this would hurt us. I painted a year ago, I said tiredly. Your lawsuit has nothing to do with me. You made us look like villains. I made art. You made choices. Don't confuse the two. He hung up, but the damage was done. My name was tied to their scandal now, but not the way they intended. People saw my paintings as prophetic, evidence that I'd seen through their facade long before the world did. My work's value tripled overnight. I stopped checking the news, stopped reading comments. Their collapse wasn't my responsibility anymore. The email came from a blocked sender, subject line blank. Inside, just one sentence. Pierce Family Foundation requests mural commission for legacy project. I stared at my laptop screen for 5 solid minutes, reading those words over and over. Pierce was Mom's maiden name, the name of their family foundation. They wanted me to paint for them after everything, after years of treating me like an embarrassment. My agent called an hour later, breathless. Elena, do you know who the Pierce Foundation is? They're offering 6 figures for a commemorative mural. This could change everything. I know who they are, I said flatly. And I thought about that torn letter, the voided check, the dinner where they treated me like furniture. I thought about the years of silence, the calls I'd blocked, the way they tried to use my success against me when their own reputation crumbled. Every instinct screamed to refuse, to tell them exactly where they could put their commission. But something else whispered underneath, something darker and more patient. Tell them I accept, I said slowly. But I choose the subject, the style, everything. Full artistic control. Elena, are you sure? I'm sure, I said and hung up. This wasn't forgiveness. This was something else entirely. The contract arrived by courier, 20 pages of legal language that all said the same thing. They wanted me to paint their family legacy, make them look good, restore their tarnished reputation through art. I read every word twice, marking the sections about artistic control. They'd agreed to all my terms, desperate enough to give me complete freedom. The only requirement was that the mural be appropriate for public display, and represent the Pierce family's contributions to the community. I signed at my kitchen table with coffee growing cold beside me. My hand moved steadily across the signature line. Elena Ward. Not Pierce, never Pierce again. That name belonged to people who'd cut me loose and expected me to drown. The advance payment hit my account 2 days later. Enough money to quit my diner shifts, to rent a real studio, to buy supplies without checking price tags. Should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like ammunition. I set up my new studio in a converted warehouse space with northern light and high ceilings. The wall they'd requested the mural for was 20 feet wide and 12 feet tall, in the main entrance of their foundation building. Everyone who entered would see it. Everyone would know. My sketches began that night, and they weren't kind. The Pierce mansion looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown too big for their carefully controlled spaces. Mom answered the door in pearls and a cashmere sweater, her smile tight and practiced. Elena. So good of you to come. No hug, no warmth. We might have been strangers meeting for a business transaction. Maybe that's all we'd ever been. Dad waited in his study, sitting behind the same massive desk where he'd voided my tuition check. He stood to shake my hand, formal and cold. "We appreciate you taking this commission," he said, like I was a contractor, not his daughter. "I appreciate the artistic freedom," I replied, matching his tone. Marcus joined us, looking older and more worn than I remembered. The lawsuit had aged him. He nodded at me, barely meeting my eyes. Vanessa stayed home, probably on purpose. She'd seen my paintings. She knew what I was capable of. "We want you to paint who we used to be," Dad explained, gesturing to faded family portraits on the walls. "Before all this unpleasantness. When we were respected." "I'll paint what I see," I said carefully. He missed the warning in my voice. They all did. They saw what they wanted to see. Their daughter, finally compliant, finally useful. They had no idea what was coming. I spent 2 weeks sketching them, sitting quietly in their home while they performed their carefully rehearsed family routines. They thought I was documenting their best selves. I was documenting their truth. Mom hid pills in her afternoon tea, anxiety medication she popped like candy when she thought no one was watching. Dad snapped at their housekeeper over invisible specks of dust, his voice cruel and petty. Marcus scrolled through his phone during dinner, responding to damage control messages from his lawyers. They were careful around me, putting on shows of warmth and unity. But houses have memories, and their house remembered everything. The marks on the wall where my artwork had hung before Dad threw it away. The dining room where they'd ambushed me with requests for free labor. The kitchen where my dreams had been torn in half. I sketched it all, the cracks in their foundation that they couldn't see or refused to acknowledge. At night in my studio, I began translating those sketches into something larger, darker, honest in ways they'd never allowed themselves to be. The mural grew under my hands, and it was not kind. Dad showed up at my studio unannounced on a Tuesday morning. I heard his car before I saw him, the same luxury sedan he'd always driven. He walked in without knocking, and stopped dead when he saw the half-finished canvas. The mural showed their house split open like a dollhouse, rooms exposed. In the background, a small figure walked away alone into darkness while the family faced inward, seeing only themselves. Their faces were distorted, caught in expressions they'd never admit to wearing. "This isn't us," he said, voice rising. "This isn't what we agreed to." "This is exactly what you are," I replied, not looking up from my palette. "You just don't like seeing it. Elena, you're making us look like monsters. I'm making you look honest. That's different." His face turned the specific shade of red I remembered from childhood, anger barely controlled. "Change it. Paint something else. This is unacceptable." "The contract says full artistic control," I said calmly, finally meeting his eyes. "You signed it. You wanted my work, this is my work. You don't get to control how I see anymore." He stood there trembling with rage, looking for a way to bend me back into the shape he wanted. Finding none, he turned and left, slamming the studio door hard enough to rattle the windows. I went back to painting, my hand steady. This was exactly the reaction I'd expected. The mural took 3 months to complete. I painted in a kind of fever, working through nights, sleeping on the studio couch when exhaustion finally took me. Every brushstroke felt like truth-telling, like testimony, like finally speaking after years of enforced silence. I mixed my red paint with ink, specifically choosing the same shade Dad had used to void that check. The color of rejection, of cruelty disguised as practicality. It appeared throughout the mural, bleeding through the walls of their perfect house, staining their carefully maintained image. The signature went in the bottom right corner, large and deliberate. Elena Ward, 2024. Not hidden, not modest. I wanted everyone to know exactly who had painted this, who had seen through their performance to the rot underneath. "Legacy complete," I whispered to the empty studio. The mural showed everything they'd tried to hide. The daughter walking away while they turned their backs. The gold and praise heaped on the golden sun. The mother's averted eyes, choosing comfort over courage. The father's clenched fists, control disguised as concern. It was brutal and beautiful and absolutely unforgivingly true. They'd commissioned their legacy. I delivered it. Just not the version they'd imagined. The unveiling gala was scheduled for a Saturday evening in March. The Pierce Foundation's main hall, usually reserved for charity dinners and donor appreciation events, was transformed into an art gallery. Crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, a string quartet playing in the corner. I arrived alone, wearing a simple black dress. The mural waited behind burgundy velvet curtains, the kind used for theater reveals. Dramatic, appropriate for what was about to happen. Dad had insisted on dramatic. He was about to get more drama than he'd bargained for. The room filled with donors, board members, local politicians, society reporters. Everyone who mattered in their world, assembled to witness the Pierce family's triumphant return to respectability through art. Through me, the daughter who'd failed them by choosing paint over prestige. I stood in the back watching. Mom looked elegant in designer navy. Dad distinguished in his tuxedo. Marcus and Vanessa flanked them like supporting actors. All smiles for the cameras. They'd staged this perfectly. Their redemption story ready to be told. Dad approached the microphone, tapping it twice. The room quieted. "Tonight we celebrate unity," he announced, voice carrying across the marble floor. "Family, legacy, and the power of art to bring us together. My daughter Elena has created something truly special." The irony nearly made me laugh. He had no idea. Dad pulled the velvet rope, and the curtains swept aside with theatrical precision. The unveiling took 3 seconds. The gasps took longer, spreading through the crowd like ripples in disturbed water. The mural stopped conversations mid-sentence. Champagne flutes paused halfway to lips. The string quartet's music faltered and died. In the silence, 200 people stared at the brutal honesty I'd painted across 20 feet of wall. Their fractured house laid bare. The exiled daughter. The family turning away, choosing image over love. Every ugly truth they'd tried to bury, illuminated under gallery lights for everyone to see. It was more than a painting. It was an indictment. Mom made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Her hand found Dad's arm, gripping it for support. Dad's carefully practiced smile cracked and fell away, leaving his face blank with shock. Marcus stared at the mural, his expression moving from confusion to horror as he recognized himself in the painted figures. Vanessa was the first to recover, her voice cutting through the silence. "Is this some kind of joke?" "It's the truth," I said from the back of the room. Heads turned toward me. "You asked me to paint your legacy. This is it." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush us all. The reporters moved first, phones out, cameras clicking. Questions flew across the room like accusations. "Is this autobiographical? Are these your parents? What message are you sending?" I stepped forward, calm despite the chaos. "Every brushstroke is honest," I said. "They asked for their legacy. Painted what I saw. What I lived." A reporter I recognized from the earlier article pushed forward. "This is about them cutting you off. This is about family that values image over people," I replied. "About parents who destroy their children's dreams and call it love. About the cost of maintaining a perfect facade." Dad found his voice finally, rough and desperate. "This is slander. She's lying. She's making us look honest." I interrupted. "I'm making you look honest. That's what you can't stand." The phones kept recording. Social media posts went live in real time. #Pierce mural started trending before the gala even ended. Someone streamed the whole confrontation on Instagram. By midnight, the story had spread across the internet, my truth finally louder than their carefully controlled narrative. Mom left first, stumbling toward the exit in her heels. Dad followed, his face ashen. Marcus stood frozen, watching his family's reputation crumble around him. The mural watched back, impassive and permanent. The fallout was immediate and total. By Monday morning, 3 major donors had withdrawn from the Pierce Foundation. By Wednesday, the board had called an emergency meeting to discuss damage control. By Friday, the charity announced it was distancing itself from the Pierce family name. My mural became the most discussed artwork of the year. Art critics wrote think pieces about truth in family portraiture. Social media exploded with people sharing their own stories of parental rejection. I became accidentally famous, not just as an artist but as a symbol of survival. Dad sent one text, getting through before I could update my blocks. "You've destroyed us." I deleted it without responding. They'd destroyed themselves years ago. I just made it visible. The mural hung in that entrance hall for 3 days before the foundation board voted to remove it. But the damage was permanent. Photographs circulated everywhere. You can't unpaint truth once it's been seen. My agent fielded calls from galleries in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. Museums wanted to discuss retrospectives. Collectors who'd never heard of me suddenly wanted any painting I'd ever touched. My prices increased tenfold overnight. Everything I'd worked for finally arriving, but not the way anyone expected. I stood alone in my studio that following Sunday, surrounded by canvases and silence. The mural's photographs covered my laptop screen, shared and reshared thousands of times. People called it brave, devastating, necessary. They called me unforgiving, honest, cruel. Maybe I was all of those things. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened windows. I looked different now, harder somehow. The girl who'd packed boxes in the rain was gone. In her place stood someone who'd learned to paint her truth without apology, without shame, without asking permission. "I didn't destroy you," I said to my absent family, my voice quiet in the empty space. "You built your own ruins. I just documented them." A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Unexpected at this hour past 9 on a Sunday night. I approached cautiously, looking through the peephole. My mother stood in the hallway, smaller than I remembered. Her expensive coat wrapped tight against cold that was more internal than atmospheric. I opened the door slowly, chain still attached. We stared at each other across that small gap, years of silence between us. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice was different, stripped of its usual authority. She sounded old, tired, afraid. I removed the chain and stepped aside. She entered like she was walking into a courtroom, braced for judgment. Maybe she was. Mom sat on my studio couch, hands folded in her lap, not touching anything. She looked around at my paintings, my life, seeing it clearly for maybe the first time. The evidence of what I'd built without them, despite them. "We were wrong," she said finally. No preamble, no excuses. "Your father and I, we wanted control more than we wanted your happiness. We thought we knew better. We thought you'd fail and learn your lesson and come back grateful." She swallowed hard. "You didn't fail. And we lost you." I said nothing, just waited. She'd come here to speak. Let her speak. "The mural," she continued, voice breaking slightly. "It was cruel. But it was also true. I see that now. I saw you leaving and I said nothing. I watched him tear up your letter, and I stayed silent. I chose him over you, comfort over courage. I did exactly what you painted." Tears tracked down her face, ruining her makeup. She didn't wipe them away. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I see it now. What we did. What I did." She stood to leave, then paused at the door, pulling something from her purse. A small box, worn at the edges. She set it on my work table and left without another word, the door closing softly behind her. Inside the box were 2 pieces of torn paper, carefully preserved. My acceptance letter, both halves, the tear line visible where Dad had ripped it. She'd kept them. All these years she'd kept them. I sat at my table for an hour, just looking at those torn pieces. The paper had yellowed slightly, the fold lines permanent. Rhode Island School of Design, the letterhead still proud despite the damage. My name, Elena Ward, split down the middle. I found tape in my desk drawer, clear and archival. Slowly, carefully, I aligned the two halves, pressing them together. The tear line remained visible, a scar that wouldn't fade. But the letter was whole again, readable, mine. Some things, once broken, show their damage forever. That's not weakness. That's history. That's proof of survival. I'd been torn in half by my family's rejection, and I'd taped myself back together, stronger for the breaking. My phone rang. My agent, her voice breathless with excitement. "Elena, you won't believe this. The Museum of Modern Art wants to discuss an international exhibit. Your work, a full retrospective, traveling to 6 countries over 2 years." I held the taped letter in my free hand, looking at my name made whole again. "Send me the details," I said. "I'm interested." After hanging up, I carefully placed the letter in a frame, the tear visible, intentional. This was part of my legacy too, the breaking and the mending both. I'd hang it in my next show, let people see where I came from and how far I'd traveled. Some stories need their scars shown. The Museum of Modern Art exhibition opened on a Tuesday in October, 6 months after the mural scandal. The space was enormous, white walls stretching up toward skylights. My work hung chronologically, a journey from those early cardboard paintings through the mural photographs to my newest pieces. Crowds moved through the galleries in reverent silence, studying each canvas. Critics called the show unflinching and transformative. Students sketched in notebooks, learning from my techniques. Collectors whispered about prices that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. I stood near the entrance, watching strangers connect with my work, seeing their own family pain reflected in my painted truths. This was why I'd fought to keep painting, why I'd survived those freezing apartments and double shifts. Not for fame or revenge, but for this. The moment when art becomes conversation, when personal truth becomes universal. Dad appeared in the back of the gallery, barely visible among the crowd. He looked smaller here, diminished by the space and the art. He moved through the room slowly, seeing years of my life displayed on walls, reading the plaques that explained each painting's context. He stopped longest at the mural photographs, staring at his painted face. Finally, he approached me, moving like a man walking to sentencing. "Elena," he said, then stopped, seeming to forget what came next. "We need your help." We sat in the museum cafe, fluorescent lights harsh after the gallery's soft illumination. Dad looked old, really old, not just aged but defeated. The lawsuit had ruined Marcus. The foundation had collapsed. Their name, once prestigious, was now synonymous with hypocrisy and failure. "I'm not here to apologize," he said, which was at least honest. "I'm here because we're losing everything. The house, the foundation, everything we built. And I thought..." He stopped, unable to finish. "You thought I could paint something to save your reputation," I finished for him. "Something flattering, something that would make people forget the mural. You're famous now," he said. "People listen to you. One painting could change everything." I looked at this man who'd torn my dreams in half and expected me to thank him for it. Who'd spent years making me feel worthless, then wanted me to save him when his own choices caught up. The anger I'd expected didn't come. Just a cold, clear understanding of exactly who he was. "All right," I said softly. "I'll paint something." His face transformed with desperate hope. "Really? Elena, thank you, But I choose the subject," I interrupted. Full artistic control. Just like before. He hesitated, remembering the mural, but desperation won. "Fine. Whatever you think is best." I smiled, and it wasn't kind. "I'll start tomorrow." The unveiling happened 3 months later at a smaller gallery in Providence, where I'd first started showing my work. Full circle, symmetry, appropriate. Dad and Mom came, dressed carefully, hoping for redemption. Marcus stayed away, probably wise of him. The painting was massive, 6 feet tall and 8 feet wide. Sunset colors, golds and oranges and deep purples. A woman stood alone before a sunrise, her back to the viewer, facing light. Her posture spoke of strength, of survival, of someone who'd walked through fire and emerged transformed. The title plaque read simply, "Freedom." Dad stared at it, confusion crossing his face. "Where are we?" he whispered. I stood beside him, looking at the painting I'd created. "You're gone," I said. "This isn't about you anymore. Never was really. You were just the obstacle I had to overcome." Understanding dawned slowly, painfully. He'd thought I was painting their salvation. Instead, I'd painted mine. Their legacy wasn't a family dynasty or a charitable foundation. Their legacy was teaching me exactly who not to become. "I didn't paint your legacy," I said, my voice clear and final. "I painted mine." I walked away then, leaving them standing before the painting, small and irrelevant in its light. Outside, the evening air was cool and clean. My phone held messages from galleries, museums, collectors. My future, built entirely by my own hands, stretched out before me like that painted sunrise. It survived. More than that, I'd transformed survival into art, pain into purpose. They tried to cut me off, to make me disappear. Instead, they'd freed me to become exactly who I was always meant to be. And that was the greatest legacy of all.